Lee Moriarty, it's good to be finally sitting with you and having this chat. How's your life going?
Pretty good, same as always. Not really much of a difference.
Yeah, I want to apologize to you right up front. And it's because when we wrestled 2 years ago, I was so excited about it. I had seen some of your stuff, and then I went to the ring and I cut my promo, and I called you Lee Moriarty, and the crowd audibly like was like, "That's not his name," but I just think it's really funny, and it's eaten at my soul ever since because you deserve better than
No, you're good. It's one of those names that like until you hear it a couple of times, you don't really get it right when you read it. So
that.
I'm cool with that. Yeah.
Is that your real name or did you make that up?
Yeah, that's my real name.
Okay, I
Like,
mean,
yeah,
it's a solid real name.
thanks.
You
It's
can't.
like a lot of people are Sherlock Holmes fans, so they're able to like click on to it really quickly. It's
Gotcha.
not, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, uh, quarantine's been rough for everyone, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording. You said you adjusted just fine. You're just waiting for wrestling to pick back up, and I feel like before quarantine hit, you really had some momentum going. When we wrestled 2 years ago, I pulled you aside immediately after, and I was like, "Yo, you need to get out, man," because like
Yeah.
I could just tell that you had something special, and I'm so happy that so many other people, so many fans are catching on and seeing what's so special about Lee Moriarty. What do you think has caught on over the last few months?
I think I was just doing like what you said. I had to get out. You would hear it a little bit, but then you were like the first well-known established name I got to work with on the independent scene. So to hear it from you and like get your support helped me a lot. And there was a few other people like throughout, like Joaquin Wild or DJZ. He also helped me get out a lot too. So just having support of people that were higher levels above me helped me to like start to progress the way I needed to. It's like the past 2 years.
Yeah. So are you born and raised from Pittsburgh?
Yeah,
No.
here the whole time, my whole life.
Yeah. So in Pittsburgh, there have been a lot of notable talents that have rose to the top ranks of professional wrestling. You mentioned DJZ, who's in NXT now, and guys like Sterling James Keenan, also known as Corey Graves, guys of that nature. But I feel like over the past few years, and I could be wrong, I feel like it's harder for guys to break out of Pittsburgh. And I don't know if that's like an unwillingness to travel or what it is, because there is some talent in Pittsburgh. What were your findings training in Pittsburgh under Brandon Kay and Dean Radford? What kind of foundation did that lay for you?
They gave me a really good foundation. And so like on independent wrestling, especially the way it's evolved because of the internet and gifts and stuff, it's become more about like just getting noticed off of this move and stuff like that. But the way they trained me, it was always about a foundation of understanding all these different styles and be able to work with them and storytelling. And that helped me a lot become the wrestler I am now. And you're right, it is harder for us to break out from Pittsburgh. And I think it's just because it's somewhat of a bubble. Like it's not really bad, but if you want to get out, especially the way wrestling works now, you have to travel outside of your area to get noticed.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Now, have you been a wrestling fan your whole life? Because on my research, I realized you watch WWE, but your first real love in pro wrestling really ended up becoming when you saw some YouTube footage from one of the Super J Cups. So tell me about that growing up as a professional wrestling fan.
Yeah, so I didn't start watching wrestling until I was probably 12 or yeah, 12. I actually found it because of the Boogeyman. I was like channel surfing and I saw him. It was so weird, but it was cool. So
Yeah.
I got into it a little bit then. And then since I grew up around the internet, I was able to research it and I found some old New Japan footage on YouTube and stuff and started studying it more. And those Super J Cups and the Best of Super Juniors, that's kind of how I got into Japanese style wrestling and why Japan is such a big goal for me. It's actually like the goal.
No, I mean, that makes perfect sense. There's a lot of Japanese influence in your wrestling. There's a lot of Japanese influence in your style. I know you're a big fan of Bruce Lee, of Wu-Tang Clan. Tell me about how that's been an influence, not just on your wrestling career, but on your entire life.
Bruce Lee was a big influence because of his philosophy more than just him being a martial artist and stuff. Like the whole be water thing, I quote that all the time. And it's the same with wrestling. It's being able to be adaptable and changing with your environment. I always looked up to him as being this guy. He was always told no and stuff because of him being an Asian guy trying to make it in Hollywood and stuff like that. He just never quit, and he always kept doing things his way, and it worked out. And then, like, I didn't really listen to music a lot growing up, but I'm a big fan of hip hop culture. So as I got older and I started to listen to Wu-Tang, my dad was a big Wu-Tang fan, and seeing them mix that with martial arts and stuff, it was really cool. And I try to like take that aesthetic with my stuff.
Now, I know that today you do graphic design, so I imagine you've been an artist for a long time. Me, myself, growing up, I was a big fan of comics, and I thought my whole life I would grow up and become an artist. And, I fell too far in love with professional wrestling to pursue that. But when did your love for art really develop?
Probably when I was like elementary school, like 8 or 9. My mom would always get me pens and papers to draw. My dad would get me the Dragon Ball Z VHSs, and I would draw off of that. Before I became a wrestler, or before I wanted to become a wrestler, I wanted to be a character designer for cartoons and stuff like that. So I stuck with that, and it actually helped me with the wrestling because now I can like do all my own stuff and be more creative. It helped me have that creative outlet that I can use in wrestling and get an advantage, especially during quarantine, like me learning how to edit it and all that stuff. It kind of kept me a little bit more relevant while I couldn't wrestle.
Yeah. Now, talking to you, I know this when we worked together, and just from seeing some of your promos and stuff and your other interviews, you're sort of a shy guy, and you're really laid back. And
Yeah.
posted something recently, and I wish I would have went back and watched it. Something about you just being like a good human, essentially. You posted this video just how you refuse to be this bad person, and I think it was in response to the speaking out movement. Because there was a lot of too much garbage that came out of that whole situation. So, what exactly is it that keeps you on the straight and narrow? Like, you don't strike me as a partier, and I can appreciate that. Like, I'm not one to really go out after the shows unless it's like a scenario where I know no one's going to act too rowdy. I like to just go home. I love wrestling. I just want to study wrestling. So what makes you the person you are? Is it your upbringing? Is it the influences of like Bruce Lee or things of that nature? What is it?
I think it's a little of everything. My upbringing, I had both my parents in my life, and I'm the oldest of my siblings, so I kind of had to set an example. So no one in my family lived their dreams. Like no one really pursued them. My mom couldn't because she had me kind of young, and like they just it was like just work everyday life and be cool with that. I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want my brothers and sisters to think that they couldn't pursue their stuff. So it's like I had to put everything I have into wrestling, and like you, I just love wrestling. I love the art of it and everything about it and the way it makes me feel. So it's something I had to do. I had to try because especially growing up in high school, people were always like saying, you could get seriously hurt doing this. It could be like career or life threatening and stuff like that. And it's like, I could be gone any day. I'm not going to like worry about that right now. I'm just going to have fun while I'm here. And me being a good person, it's just, again, how I was raised. And what wrestling did for me, I want to be able to do for other people. I can't use it for myself as much as I can to help others.
That's awesome. Now, at what point do you realize I'm going to be a professional wrestler? I don't care what people say, the doubters, the haters, you're going to pursue this one way or another.
It wasn't long after watching the Boogeyman and SmackDown and stuff. Like, it was probably a few weeks. I was like, I want to do this. It probably wasn't until high school that I was like, okay, this is pretty serious. And I was committed to saying it. Like, I did my senior project on pro wrestling, whether it's a sport or not or whatever and all that. Like, everything I did from that moment of watching it was trying to figure out how I could get into wrestling.
Just out of curiosity, because I did something similar in high school where I used one of my English reports. I basically did it on the history of professional wrestling. And that was it had to be like 1,000 words or something ridiculous. And I definitely surpassed that. So when you do a report on is wrestling a sport or not, what was your argument?
It was just the way wrestling works. So when people think of sport, they automatically just think of stuff like football or basketball. That's just a straight competition. But you also have to think of stuff like gymnastics while they do perform and there is like somewhat of a routine, there's also improvising. It's just because there's a predetermined outcome that people automatically dismiss it, that we're not doing something athletic or competitive. And I remember during my senior project, I had to interview two people in that field, and one of them was Tommaso Ciampa, and he said something I never really thought about before that, and he was saying like, "Wow, we're working together when we're opponents. We're still competing on that show to like stand out. So we are using our athleticism and stuff like that to try to compete with the other people on the card to stand out, so that we get noticed and we can move up to the next level."
Tommaso's a smart man. I'm not surprised that he would say something like that. Now, when you start training with Brandon Kay and Dean Radford, they're teaching you certain things. Are they teaching you just basics, and then you're kind of asking or asking if you could try certain things based on what you're watching, or are they showing you things from like a Japanese style wrestling? Because I feel like with what you're studying, I feel like you're trying to grasp all the knowledge and try to do all of the styles that you can possibly learn.
Yeah, they definitely taught us all the basics. Like we understood the basic of the moves. And once you have the mechanics of certain things now, you can kind of figure them out yourself. If there was something I didn't really understand, I could like screen record it or show them on YouTube at training, and they would help me break it down. Like Dean Radford has experience in Mexico and Japan. Brandon, who was kind of like the innovator with Super Hentai of that style when he was coming up, that more fast-paced cruiserweight. So he was able to help me adapt with that. But like pretty much, like you said, I just watch a lot of wrestling, like almost too much wrestling. And I like try to figure out how I can apply this. Like, how can I mix this world of sport thing with this lucha libre thing and make it my own instead of just straight up taking this move from somebody else.
You mentioned world of sport. I remember you talking to me after our match, and you said one of your biggest influences was Johnny Saint. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm a big Johnny Saint fan and Les Kellett. I really like that comedy wrestling with the grappling. It's really cool.
Yeah. Who else influenced you? You know, you mentioned how the Boogeyman was the first guy you saw. When you talk about WWE guys, Japanese guys, who were your biggest influences and guys that inspired you to actually get into the business?
So the Boogeyman was a guy that like made me start watching wrestling, but my favorite when I was a kid was Jeff Hardy, just because the colors and all the crazy stuff he would do. As I got older and more into the sport of it, Tiger Mask, the first one, Sayama, became my all-time favorite. And I'm a big fan of Chris Hero, just because his versatility, especially being a guy his size, being able to do the stuff he does. That's kind of a reason I wrestle the way I do.
Those are all good choices. Now, you do so many different styles. You describe your style with a certain word. Can you throw your style out there for me?
Yeah, it's Tiger style. Not Tiger, Tiger, like the Wu-Tang song.
Talk to me about that, man. Like, what made you come up with that to describe your own personal brand of pro wrestling?
So, when I started wrestling, I wanted to be a masked wrestler. I wanted to have a tiger mask and stuff like that because I'm my all-time favorite. But my trainer's like, "Nah, you're not allowed to wear a mask." So I always had this idea in the back of my head. Maybe one day I'll become that.
Why weren't you allowed to wear a mask?
Because they said I emoted too well with my face, and then like, yeah, stuff like that.
I'll take that. That's a good reason.
Yeah, I get it. I guess because like El Generico and stuff, they took the mask off of him because he does emote well and things like that. But what was I saying? Oh yeah. So it was after my trip to Mexico, I actually got a mask made, and it was just going to be a tiger mask. I didn't really have an idea of the name. It was listening to a Wu-Tang song the one day. It was Wu-Tang Clan Ain't Nothing to F with, and at the beginning of it, they say tiger style, and that's where I came up with that word. And then it's just, I'm not good with explaining who I am in wrestling. It's better for me to show things. So I use Tiger style like Bruce Lee uses Jeet Kune Do. It's just adapting and using stuff uniquely for you. So Tiger style is my Jeet Kune Do, my way of fighting.
You said uniquely for you. There are a lot of parallels that I want to talk about in a little bit. I don't know if you realize this. Johnny Gargano's finishing move, which in Evolve and Dragon Gate was called the Hertz Donut because he's an idiot. It was originally called Uniquely You. And one of his biggest inspirations was Johnny Saint. And one of the guys that influenced him the most when it came to learning in the ring would end up being Alex Shelley. We're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to get to that in a second because I know those 3 matches with Shelley were a big deal for you, and we're definitely
Yeah.
going to touch on that. But I think what really got the ball rolling for you was you deciding to do the tryout that AIW was hosting a couple of years back. So talk to me about that process. How exactly you were talking into doing it? Was it something that you wanted to do yourself? Run me through that whole scenario.
So before that trial got announced, I did the Ultimo Dragon seminar back in September of the year before. So they were kind of familiar with me. And then I remember as they were making that decision before it went public, I had a bunch of people who worked at AIW messaging me saying, hey, you should probably do this trial, like Derek Direction, Dominic Green and Matt Justice, all those guys, like just give it a shot. And I did it, and it was definitely, it was nerve-wracking, especially seeing like all the other people that were there. I was like, there's no way I'm getting picked. But I was lucky enough that I got on the show, and that was definitely like the starting point because it put me in front of a bigger platform than I've ever been on, and able to work with a lot of new talent and stuff like Colin Delaney and Alex Shelley.
Okay, talk to me about what you learned from Colin Delaney, because I think your casual fans just see Colin as the guy who was essentially a jobber for WWE 12 years ago, but I think Colin is one of the best minds in the business.
Yeah, he to me is one of my best opponents I've had, especially being a last-minute replacement. I was originally supposed to face Cole Cabana in the J-Lit tournament, but he had an injury, so they put Colin in there with me, and it helped a lot. So when I got into AIW, I had this perception that there was a completely different style or a format of the way I should wrestle. But like talking to Colin, understanding that the thing that made AIW or a lot of these bigger promotions special is that you could just be yourself and be you and try to figure out how to make your stuff stand out. So working with him, being someone that he can do pretty much everything, helped me a lot to grow from there. And I feel like that was a big like stepping stone, or not a stepping stone, but like a big step forward for me.
How long are you in AIW before the match with Alex Shelley happens? And did you know it was coming? Was it something that caught you off guard? I'm sure whenever it was announced to you, you were nervous as hell.
Yeah, it happened the same year in like my debut at AIW. So I passed the tryout in, I think February, and then our first match was in November. I remember it was at the AIW anniversary show, I believe at Absolution. That's when they told me that I was going to be facing him, and this was, he was just coming back to pro wrestling. He just came back to ring with Matt Taven, and then he had two matches at AIW, one with Dominic Green and one with Joey Janela. So for me to be his third opponent in AIW and I'm brand new was insane to think about, that they would even let me be in the ring with him. But that was really cool to get to do that. I was extremely nervous, especially because the Motor City Machine Guns, their style influenced me a lot growing up in TNA because they were guys my size, but they were combining everything. Like they were really good at technical wrestling. They were really good at the lucha and all that stuff. So it was cool to be able to work with them.
So run me through the process of the 3 matches. Let's start with the first one. You know, what's the ending scenario and how quickly do you start to form a bond with Alex Shelley? Does this happen before the match? Does it happen after the match? Does he see something special in you right off the bat? How does that work?
So originally it was just supposed to be one match. It was not supposed to be a series. It ended up being more after that. But talking to him throughout the process of getting the match ready, I think we started to bond a little bit more because I could understand what he was talking about when he was making certain references. And because I studied him, I knew what he was talking about when he was trying to explain things. So that helped out a lot. The match was easily the most nervous I've ever been because there's a lot of stuff I've never done. And also he's like a freak of nature in terms of cardio and stuff like that. I don't get blown up. I can wrestle 40 minutes and stuff like that, but being in there for 10 minutes with him, I felt like I could not breathe. And he is like not breaking a sweat.
Dude, one time me and Gargano went to the gym with Shelley, and me and Johnny worked out and did cardio for like 90 minutes. Shelley just stayed on the elliptical the whole 90 minutes. He's an insane person. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Continue.
Yeah, it was crazy how like good shape as he is in. But after the match, we talked a lot about stuff. Like he talked to me about his decision to like step away from wrestling for a little bit to pursue his degree with therapy and all that stuff. And that like helped me because I was thinking about doing something similar, not necessarily stepping away from wrestling, but going back to school to get my graphic design degree or certificate, something like that. And I think a month after that conversation, I actually enrolled in a design certificate class because of the conversation we had. Like, he told me he feels more free in wrestling now because it's his choice. He's not relying on wrestling just for a paycheck. He can make his decisions to have as much fun as he wants. He's not binded by wrestling. And that's like something that really resonates with me. I don't want to be binded by wrestling. I don't want to have to do something in wrestling because then I feel like it takes away from the artistic creativity. But that helped me a lot. And then like we just talked for an hour after that match and giving me advice and recommendations and stuff like that.
Is that first match the one that's on YouTube?
Yeah, that's the one that I got put on YouTube.
Okay, when I watched that, I got to tell you, Lee, it was pretty flawless, to be honest with you. And I think that that style of wrestling with the chain wrestling and the counters and reversals, I feel like, and I don't know your opinion, I'd like to get it. I feel like it's becoming a lost art, and I kind of hate that. When I watched that match, it reminded me of the wrestling that I love. And there's a certain style, there's a bunch of different styles that work today. But I feel like on the independent scene, while I appreciate no selling and I appreciate trade spots and counter after counter after counter after counter, sometimes with no payoff, sometimes that's kind of ridiculous. I wish there was a little bit less no selling and a little bit less counter after counter. What you guys did was something that you don't see it often anymore. What are your thoughts on the style of pro wrestling on the independent circuit today?
I think the style is just a product of the internet. So we have so much easier access to see all this stuff. You see the stuff in Japanese wrestling, like the no selling. Sometimes people don't necessarily understand that strong style isn't about like nailing something or getting hit as hard as you can. Like if you watch a Kawada match, he might eat it, but then you'll see him stumble a little bit afterwards because he's not like, it doesn't affect him at all. He's just like trying to play it off. And sometimes that doesn't translate over here because they just watch the spots. Not a lot of people, but definitely like lower level independents because they haven't learned it yet. But it's just a product of like being able to see everything. You see lucha and you want to figure out how to take this spot because it looks cool and put it in here. I like counter wrestling because I like the idea of it being a chess match and thinking stuff out. That's like my favorite part of wrestling too, is the art of it. That's what drew me to the world of sport, is the thinking man's wrestling.
Yeah, just right from the get-go, you and Shelley had me in that first match just with the chaining and, you know, the old crawl underneath spots and hop over top. You guys went to the top rope and you teased that right off the back. And then it got paid off later when I think Shelley did was it the sliced bread off the top rope?
Yeah.
Yeah, just great story. You guys did some stuff on the floor. Shelley's always been good with aggression and things like that. So, like, it was the perfect spot for all that. Just a great match. Now, I haven't seen matches 2 and 3. Run me through the process of those matches and how they all played out.
So something that happened in that first match unintentionally, I think became a big part of the other 2 matches. And if you watch the beginning of it, there's that handshake where I try to reach out my hand and he slaps it away. That played a role into the rest of the story. Is it became more about me earning his respect. And like the first match was very technical and counters and all that stuff. The second match, it was me showing that I can fight back because he pretty much whooped my ass through 80% of that match in our second match. Yeah. And like I said, it wasn't supposed to happen, but they were so happy with the first match, they didn't have a return matter on when they were on Fight TV. So that was really cool. And then the third match, he challenged me after the second into a submission match, which I knew he wanted to do a third one, but I didn't know he was going to say a submission match. So we did that. And that was, I think I've only ever done one other submission match. So that was a lot of pressure to be in there, but it was a lot of fun. And I feel like that match, especially because it was on IWTV Live, was the big, like, I guess, coming out party for me. That was the one, like, I really started to get noticed more and more, especially this year.
So besides that first match when you start bonding with Shelley, how much of an influence has he been to you in general, just with the relationship you guys have formed? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, he's even made a suggestion that you guys should do some tag team stuff.
Yeah. So he bought a tiger mask because he wanted to team with me in AIW. And before the pandemic, I think we were going to team up in the match. So that would have been really cool with the fact that he wanted to team up with me when he has guys like Chris Sabin and Kushida as tag team partners. Is super cool. but he's had a lot of influence me, not just in wrestling, but in my personal life. Like I said, with the schooling and stuff, and just his philosophy and his way of thinking. He's definitely a deep thinker, and if you just read his tweets and the way he thinks stuff out, it's inspired me a lot to like think more about stuff before I say things, which I already did before, but now it's like another level.
Yeah, Shelley's definitely a selfless guy. Again, having spent some time with him over the years, with him and Johnny, and just knowing the way he helped and influenced Johnny and still helps and influences Johnny to this very day, even down to, it's so funny when you look at Johnny doing the, the Gargano escape. That's the Border City stretch. And now when Shelley does the Border City stretch, they're like, oh, he's doing the Gargano escape. So it's just funny how, like, these intertwine and everything comes full circle. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm glad you have a guy like that on your side. So with this added exposure from your trilogy with Shelley, you've now been wrestling places like Bizarro and GCW. And from what I've seen, people figure out things real quick. News travels fast with the internet these days. You show up at Bizarro, it was like you've been there for years when you wrestled there. GCW, you've gotten an overwhelming reception. So talk to me about branching out to these bigger feds and what that has meant for you.
It's really cool because, like you said, Pittsburgh wrestling, it's a little bit harder to break out now. So for me to be one of those guys that's able to do that and show that it's possible, it's just knowing what you want. You have to go after it. But it's cool to get that reception, especially my first time in Bizarro, having all these different chants. Like I felt like I was over in the UK, the way they do those soccer chants. That was cool. And then on GCW, people knowing who I was. When they announced that I was going to be appearing for GCW, I did not expect like people to react the way they did. I thought it was just like, oh, cool, I've heard of him and stuff like that. People were like legit excited to see me, which is crazy to think about. Like I'm getting to that level of wrestler that like I inspired to be when I was watching PWG highlights in high school on YouTube and stuff.
You talked about how you want to get to Japan. That's a great goal. When we talk about wrestlers you want to get in the ring with, though, who's on your bucket list? Give me your top three, and then if you want to give me some honorable mentions, who would those names be?
Top three. So Chris Hero is definitely like the big one, I would say. Jonathan Gresham is another one because I think my style came from him a lot. And the third one would be Chris Brooks because I'm a big fan of the way he carries himself in wrestling. Like he's also a very technical wrestler, but he's also an artist too. And seeing what he's done moving to Japan for a year just to make himself a better wrestler is really inspiring and cool.
Here's a random question, and I know we're kind of getting off topic, and for me to ask this now, I probably should have asked it earlier. Lee, what's in your headphones?
What's in my headphones?
Yeah.
I listen to pretty much anything. Like during my entrances, I'm tired of hearing my theme song, but fans love it, so it's like I can't change it. But these headphones, I remember I was listening to a pair backstage before one of my matches when I first started, and someone said I should come out to them. Originally, I didn't want to because at the time, I think Tyson Kidd and Cesaro were doing the headphone things. I was like, I don't want to be seen as like biting them. But eventually I did it, and actually I felt like it helped me a lot in growing because I felt more comfortable. It's kind of like, I don't know if this story is true or not, but I remember reading something about someone saying like Bret Hart wore the sunglasses because like it was like it relaxed him or something. It was like it was like he was nervous and stuff like that. So the headphones like calmed me a little bit, being able to listen to music and stuff. Like I listen to a lot of R&B or just like mellow music as I'm coming to the ring. People wouldn't know that because my music's so hype, but it's like pretty much the opposite. When it's in my headphones, I'm just like really calm.
It's so funny that you said you're so sick of hearing your own entrance music because, again, I can't stress this enough. The parallels between you and Gargano are ridiculous. Like when he came out to this Cursed Icon song called Down that kind of came synonymous with him on the independent circuit, particularly in AIW, which is where you're a staple of now. And so just to hear you say that, knowing how sick he was of his own entrance music, to keep drawing parallels between Gargano and yourself, that's probably the highest compliment I can give you. One more question, and if you say that you don't, I'm just going to assume you're Gargano's doppelganger. Do you swear? Because I feel like you don't swear.
I swear when it means something. Like I don't just like walk around and randomly curse stuff, and I try to censor stuff on Twitter and things like that.
Okay. All right. Fair. Because
So I
Johnny,
do not a lot.
yeah, Johnny does not swear at all, and I find that very respectable. But I can't just I don't deal with that shit. I have to. Man, I could talk to you all day, Lee. I love what you're doing. I know I sent you a direct message about this before we started recording. I I can't say how proud I am of you enough because just you know there was a series of matches working for Joe Dombrowski at welterweight and that Premier Championship Wrestling in Cleveland where he was putting me with guys who were still young, who were looking for opportunities that forced me to keep up with them. And I feel like sometimes I'm not challenged as much as I could be. And you gave me that challenge. So just to see how far you've come since then, that you're betting on yourself, that you're pursuing your dream, uh, it makes me overwhelmingly proud, and I'm proud to call you a friend.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that a lot, especially coming from you, because like I know you worked really hard to get where you are. So it's really cool that people like see that and respect
Yeah,
it. I appreciate that.
no, it's from the heart. So one last thing, you're a great dude. You're inspiring so many now through what you're doing, through your artistry, both with graphic design and in the ring. What inspires you? What keeps you going? What keeps you going with wrestling? What keeps you going with life?
I just want to have fun. Like my goal in wrestling like hasn't been to be the best wrestler and all that stuff. Maybe when I was younger, but it's like now I gotta live every day like it's my last. I just want to have fun, especially like you see the way stuff's going around in 2020. Like I just can't miss out on any opportunities that are put in front of me. If I could take it, I'm gonna take it. And I've always been a person that's set goals. Like I have all these different goals I want to accomplish by the time I'm 30, and I don't want to slow down. So that's like the big thing that keeps me going.
Hey man, you keep with this motivation, you're going to achieve every goal and then some. Lee, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me for a little bit, and I hope to see you again real soon. I think we're doing GCW together in a couple weeks.
Yeah, in July. Yeah.
So looking forward to it, and just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.